Marv Albert is right here back on the Rich Eisen Show. How are you, Marv?
Hey, Rich, how you doing?
Better for talking to you. Thanks for calling in. I appreciate it.
It is it's one of the more significant games of the regular season tonight. I think we've been fortunate with the turn of schedule because we have another Monday night too, Martin Luther King Day. We have Cleveland, Golden State playing at Cleveland, so that's it's a nice combo.
Yeah, well, the Spurs are definitely flying under the radar for a team that's won 85% of their games. I mean, that's a rarity. Everybody believes that that's the way Gregg Popovich likes it.
There's no question.
Yeah,
and it's not, as you know, it's not the first time that they have been under the radar when they've won their championships. I think that occurred, but here they've been overshadowed so much by the incredible success of Golden State. So I think that has contributed to it. But they're only now with the Warriors losing last night in Denver. It's like a 2.5 game difference. That's it. But this is the Spurs, like Cleveland and like Golden State, are a very special team. The way, particularly, the brand of basketball that they play. I mean, it's so unselfish. And it's several guys who are up there in age who are still doing it, but stats, just don't matter to these guys, and that's so important.
Marv, I mean, everybody sees the public persona of Gregg Popovich, and then there's the guy who many people say that he is. I've never met him, but I did see the way he welcomed your partner Craig Sager back when he returned for a second time this time around from battling cancer. What can you tell me your relationship with Popovich and what he is like, Marv?
Sure. First of all, Craig is with us for tonight, so it's really the first time that he's been back here in San Antonio, since he became ill. And I think that will be an emotional aspect of it, for all of us and for Craig and for Pop. Gregg Popovich is one of the great people to deal with. What we see with the attempted humor on the sideline is not necessarily his personality, but he has a very, I would say, cynical, but he has, it's a sense of humor that you will not see from many other, coaches or managers around sports, and I think he gets a kick out of it. He's like that way with his players. He's so well liked. He's obviously one of the premier coaches of all time in any sport. He just has a way of handling his players and also the people around him who work in the front office, as I think is evidenced by the fact that so many individuals have come either from the coaching staff or from the player ranks or from the front office, from video coordinators on, who are in major jobs around the NBA. And that tells you a lot about Pop, who is extremely popular around the league. I mean, he just handles everything in such a low-key manner.
Well, it's sometimes tough to figure out what he does believe and what is the persona. Does he truly believe the three-point shot is a circus shot, and he would love to see the league without it, Marv?
I know he made that statement, and then they became a three-point shooting team a couple of years ago. Right. So I think he joined the crowd. I don't think he's alone in believing that, but I think it is good for the game. It may not be necessarily good for the NBA game in terms of adding excitement, but what it has done perhaps for kids playing basketball may not be wonderful, because sometimes and you see more of the front court players now shooting it, because when they were, growing up and playing in the schoolyards, they weren't as interested in going down low and just taking advantage of smaller kids. They wanted to go outside and shoot. That's why you see Karl Anthony Towns, Anthony Davis. I mean, they really can shoot the three because, they both had growth spurts. And they, see themselves as a smaller guy in a big man's body. So you see more and more of that as opposed to the post-up type center. But the game has changed so dramatically. And getting back to the point, I think that what happens with kids in the schoolyards around the country, firing away from three-point range is not necessarily good for the overall skills of the game.
Well, and I think
there are, very gifted guys like Steph Curry,
Yes.
with his ball handling and his incredible shooting, off the dribble. And, kids think that they can do it, but very few people can do those kind of moves successfully. So I think it's had good and bad aspects, but for the NBA game, I think it's been very, very exciting. It came from the ABA, and, it was scoffed at first, but I think it's really added to the game.
Marv Albert joining me here on the Rich Eisen Show, and I'm sure you've heard your TNT compadres Shaq and Charles Barkley talk about how the game isn't as good today as it was when they played. You have seen generations of this sport, Marv, morph from one to another. Where do you stand on the subject of the current Golden State Warriors and the Jordan Bulls of the heyday, where Barkley and Shaq says it wouldn't even be a contest between the two teams?
Well, getting to the first thing you mentioned, I think all former players feel that the game is not good as when they played, whatever the sport. It's a different game. And when you talk about Michael Jordan and his team and the Warriors, Steph and Klay Thompson and their team, the rules are different. I mean, if Michael played today, because it was a more physical game when he was playing, and there were calls made that are not necessarily made today, it's been opened up to make it more exciting. I think Michael would be even more phenomenal now because of the space that he would have to, that he'd have to operate. I would still. It's a little early in that discussion because here the Warriors have won one championship, and they are very, very good. They're very talented. I love their style of play, and they also have an unselfish attitude. It's more of a pace game for them than it is San Antonio. San Antonio, because they're an older team, will not play at that kind of pace. But I think that I don't think there's any comparison at this point to those great Bulls teams, particularly the 72-win team. And I know there have been a lot of comparisons with LeBron and Michael, and it's so hard to compare guys from different eras. I mean, here are two of the greatest players of all time, but I would never pick against Michael Jordan in any game. I mean, if you can take him from the past and bring him to the present, which is obviously impossible, I still feel that Jordan would somehow come out on top.
So who's the best ball handler you've ever seen, Marv?
I think Steph Curry is right there. I mean, there have been some other good ball handlers, but I've never seen anything like what he can do in terms of not necessarily globetrotter type showboating that you would see in the past, in those days. But, I mean, he does it within the framework of the game, with the step back and the crossover, the occasional putting it between the legs. But he does it at such a fast pace. In the early days, everybody marveled at Bob Cousy with behind-the-back passes, putting between the legs. But they did it at a slower pace. What Curry is doing and being able to move and shoot off the dribble as effectively as he does is pretty phenomenal. So I don't think I can. I mean, there are other guys who've handled the ball well. I mean, Earl the Pearl Monroe did, but again, it was a slower pace. He would spin a lot. He'd put it between his legs and had the good jump shot. But it's not what Curry's doing.
How about,
I mean, we're seeing something I think that we've never seen before.
How about Pistol Pete? Does he have a little bit of that in him?
Pistol Pete, a lot of people refer back to Maravich, who really didn't see him. And the thing that sticks out in my mind is that he did not win much. When he was with the Hawks, I thought he had a tough time. I don't know if they accepted him right away. I thought he played his best ball when he came off the bench with the Celtics because he had to, with the influences around him. But I thought he was a little casual and sloppy with the ball, which came from his college days. He did a lot of spectacular things, but he was coached by his father, and he was basically allowed to do whatever he wanted to do when he was in college. And then what really struck me, and you'd be familiar with this, up at Kutcher's Country Club
Yes.
in Monticello, New York.
Oh, the Catskills. Sure.
The Catskills,
Yes.
where a lot of the NBA players and college players would go even at a younger age and be waiters. Will Chamberlain was a waiter there. But there was always a basketball camp. It was run at one time by Wilt, and then it was run by Walt Frazier, and then Pete Maravich. And my son Kenny went to Pistol Pete's camp, and I was amazed that all Pete would teach were the fundamentals. And I'm saying, you got to be kidding. Fundamentals was not number one on his list because he was more into being a showman. It turns out he would have been a very good coach because he was only interested in the fundamentals, although he would, show them tricks in terms of handling the ball. But I don't put Maravich in Curry's class at all. I mean, there's no. I just don't see that. Hot Rod Hundley is another guy who came out of college with that type of reputation, and was a solid pro, but found he couldn't do that in the NBA, because that you'd be basically trying to show off what you can do in terms of ball handling. But again, I've never seen anyone like Curry.
Wow. I got a couple more minutes left with Marv Albert before you go call the tonight's game between the Cavs and the Spurs. Have New Yorkers learned how to say the word Porzingis yet without any sense of irony, Marv? Yeah. They're into it.
He's special. He's not shooting particularly well recently. I think we're just seeing early stages of Porzingis. And, he's become very popular because, from a 17-win team, they have now become very watchable and somewhat enticing. There's hope that they could make the playoffs. It's still going to be a long way. Mm-hmm. But he is a 20-year-old from Latvia who is so mature, and I've never seen a kid that age who knows the game so well. I mean, he sets picks, he spaces the floor well, he passes so well. And that's really unusual, and he seems to handle everything extremely well. It's really unusual to see that, and I think he will eventually. It's going to take a couple of years, but he'll be a very, very good player. Perhaps an all-star player, down the road. But it's unusual to see. I mean, look at all the other rookies who have come in. Let's not count LeBron or the superstars, but others slightly below that level, and it takes a while, and it's taking a little time, but he's certainly made an impact.
I would say Porzingis, yes, and it counts. Sounds like I should say Gesundheit or something. That's a mouthful, Marv.
It does.
Don't you think?
Kristaps Porzingis. Yes, yeah, but he's fun. He's fun to watch, and he has a great, a great ad. I don't really know him. We're doing some more of his games because the Knicks are back from under the radar, so they will be appearing a little more frequently. So I look forward to that. But he's a great kid, also, I'm told.
Marv, thanks so much for calling in. I love it, and as you know, I say it to you every time. I don't care if I embarrass you at all. You're the reason why I do this every day.
Well, I appreciate that. Thanks very much, Rich. Anytime, you know that.
Oh, thank you, Marv. You're the best. Enjoy the call tonight. That's Marv Albert. Cavs at Spurs tonight on TNT.
The Rich Eisen Show, weekdays at noon Eastern. On Audience.